Have you ever built something with your whole heart, only to have it destroyed by the very person you trusted most? I'm not telling this story to complain or to seek sympathy. I'm telling it because there are far too many women out there like me who once stayed silent, who were pushed aside from what they helped create, who loved so deeply they forgot to protect their own dignity. But what I've learned is this silence doesn't mean defeat. Sometimes silence is the beginning of a powerful uprising. This is my story. I'm Clare, once the shadow behind a successful businessman, and now the woman who rose to reclaim her voice and rewrote the story that should have always carried her name. Chapter 1. I was once the one who built that company. I used to believe that there was nothing more sacred than building something from scratch with the person you love. Love may fade with time, but what two people create together, I believed, would be the final thread holding them together. Derek and I started everything in a cramped apartment using an old cardboard box as our desk and piggybacking off the neighbor's Wi-Fi. We argued over app interfaces, stayed up all night debugging broken code, and lived on instant noodles for 2 months because we couldn't land a single investor. Then one day our product succeeded. Investors came, we rented an office, we hired staff. I still remember that moment in the elevator when Derek hugged me like a child, grinning ear to ear, and said, "We did it. We." Yet only 5 years later, I had become a shadow in the very empire I helped build. It started with Derek telling me I didn't need to attend certain meetings because they were just technical and dry. Then came the contracts he signed without sending me copies. Later, when it was time to meet with partners, he'd say I should stay home and rest, because he was better at talking to them anyway. I still believed him. I still thought he did it out of love, to take the pressure off me, until one day I walked into a meeting room and not a single person looked up. Jenna, the new head of department, was presenting a plan for product expansion, and Derek was sitting there, nodding along like a powerful CEO. When I walked up to the table, Derek glanced at me and said, "Oh, you're here. Can you grab me a coffee? I'll present your part in a bit." My part, I was the one who developed the core software. I worked directly with legal to secure the algorithm patent. I designed the very first user onboarding process myself, and now I was being referred to as the coffee girl. I still remember after that meeting, Jenna came over, gently patted my shoulder and whispered, "I really admire how you've stepped back to support your husband." I'm not sure I could do the same. I smiled. Not a painful smile, but clearly a knowing one. From that day on, I truly did step back. Not because I was surrendering, but because I needed to see things more clearly from the outside. I began observing Derek like an outsider to the company. I noticed he was spending more and more hours with Jenna, and not just for work. I saw the vague emails, the messages with deleted content. I saw the way he laughed with her, that same kind of laugh he once reserved only for me. But I stayed silent. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't angry. I didn't confront them. I just started remembering. Because I knew some battles don't require a single shot, only the right moment to prove that the one pushed aside was the only one who had stayed awake. Chapter 2, when betrayal became undeniable. I used to think the cruelest thing was when someone turned their back on you. But I was wrong. The cruelest thing is when they do it right in front of you, pretend nothing's happening, and expect you not to notice. All the signs were there. I just didn't want to believe them. Meetings that ran unusually late, even though I knew his calendar wasn't that full. Dinners postponed because he had to entertain clients, only for him to come home with a loosened tie and a strange scent of perfume, not the kind I ever bought him. One evening I poured myself a glass of red wine and opened his laptop, not out of suspicion, just because I felt like I had become such a shadow that even curiosity needed permission. He hadn't changed the password, maybe because he thought I wouldn't dare touch it anymore. In his email, I found a folder named Outreach, Jenna, and inside, there were no client strategies at all. Just photos taken in hotel elevators, Hotel booking receipts that coincided exactly with my birthday, the day he said he was in Palo Alto meeting investors. There was even a photo of the two of them, sitting next to each other at a bar. Jenna was wearing the red dress I once wore on our company's launch night. She was laughing, her head resting on his shoulder. Derek's hand lay lightly on her back, a subtle gesture, meaningless on its own, except I hadn't felt that gesture from him in over a year. I didn't cry. I just sat there in the dark, the screen in front of me glowing as if it were shining directly into my chest. Truth is, it wasn't the affair that broke me. What choked me up was realizing that all those days I quietly stepped back, hoping he would finally see me, were for nothing. I had become someone who no longer needed to be hidden. I wasn't even important enough to be a secret. I was a side character, an outdated backdrop in the new show he was starring in. But what Derek didn't know was that I'm not the kind of woman who retreats to cry alone. I retreat to restructure everything in silence. The next morning, I left the house early. He was still asleep. I walked to my usual cafe, the one where I once drafted our first business plan on a napkin. I sat down, opened my laptop, and created a new folder. I named it Exit Plan. Inside, I began typing line by line the date I discovered the affair, the name of the hotel, the secondary bank account Derek used to move private funds, the shell company with Jenna listed as the acting director, the unsigned divorce papers. Each file I saved was a piece of my freedom. Not freedom from a marriage, but freedom from erasure. I didn't need Derek to come back. I didn't need Jenna to disappear. I just needed to reclaim my name from the list of women who are just someone's wife. Chapter 3. They betrayed me, and I began to fight back. I came to realize something on this battlefield. Emotions wouldn't help me survive. Logic was my only armor. I didn't have time to fall apart. No time to wait for him to feel remorse. Because if I didn't act, it wouldn't be long before my name was erased from the company's ownership records. And this time, no one would be inviting me back in. I started by quietly backing up all email files related to Derek and Jenna's transactions. Among them, I discovered something interesting. They were regularly transferring small sums of money from the company account to a satellite startup registered under Jenna's name. No one questioned it. Each amount was small enough to fly under the radar, but collectively large enough to raise a red flag. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. Ethan Rowe, the very first angel investor who believed in the project Derek and I built. A man obsessively meticulous, he used to be a finance lecturer before venturing into venture capital. When the company started making a name for itself, Derek pushed Ethan off the advisory board through an internal vote, a move I once fought against unsuccessfully. I called Ethan after 4 years of silence. "Claire?" he said, surprised. "I thought you disappeared for good." "No," I replied. "I just sat still for too long. Now I'm ready to clean out the web he spun." We met at a quiet basement bar. As I laid everything out, I watched his curious gaze turn cold. "Claire, what you're describing, if it's true, this isn't just infidelity. This is shareholder fraud." I nodded. "And what's your plan? I need your legal support. And if you're willing, I want you back in the company, but not as an advisor this time, as a strategic partner." Ethan looked at me, silent for a moment. Then he smiled, not a cheerful smile, but the kind a man wears when he sees a long-awaited opportunity to clean house. I've been waiting for this day a long time. Over the following weeks, Ethan and I worked closely. He helped me hire an independent auditing firm under a fake name to keep our tracks clean. I temporarily transferred part of my shares to my sister's name to prevent Derek from manipulating voting rights while I was away. I also amended the company's charter. Just a small clause, but an absolutely crucial one any CEO found to have violated financial ethics would be immediately suspended without requiring a vote from all shareholders. And of course, Derek signed every single document like always. He never read what I handed him carefully. He forgot that I wasn't the one bringing coffee to meetings anymore. I was the one rewriting the rules of the game. I don't regret having trusted him. What I regret is not remembering sooner power is never given. It must be reclaimed. And I had begun reclaiming mine, piece by piece. Chapter 4. The trap was set and they walked right into it. I once heard a quote, "A betrayer always thinks you're stupid until you've been silent for too long," and it's true. My silence made Derek so complacent that he began to reveal cracks, tiny ones, but enough for me to trace the entire web. The company under Jenna's name was nothing more than a hollow shell. No product, no website, no actual staff. But the money funneled in from our company was consistent. Monthly transfers from the Marketing Expansion Fund, all approved and signed by Derek himself. I didn't even need to hack the system or break a single internal rule. All I had to do was flip through the general ledger, and the numbers spoke for themselves. The brilliance of it all, Jenna used her personal account to withdraw cash from the shell company, and she thought that separating the company from Derek's name would be enough to avoid trouble. But there was one email between Derek and Jenna, not encrypted, not deleted, just buried beneath hundreds of other threads. In it, Derek wrote, "I've signed it. Use the other account to transfer. Don't worry, Claire never touches that stuff anyway." I read that line 3 times. I wasn't angry. I was intrigued. That was the moment I realized Derek wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a man willing to gamble an entire company on the assumption that no one would dare stop him. And Jenna. She wasn't just the other woman. She was an accomplice. I forwarded all the data to Ethan. He passed it on to a legal team that had been quietly preparing an internal lawsuit just in case Derek tried to fight back. I also made a duplicate package for the board of shareholders, but I didn't send it, not yet. I was still waiting for the perfect moment when everything would be exposed in the open right, when Derek believed he was at the peak of his power. And I knew that moment was drawing near. Because next week the company was hosting its annual conference where Derek would unveil our expansion strategy into the European market. A major press event filled with investors, reporters, and all the names that once voted to push me off the board. I scheduled a meeting with Derek the night before the event, not at the office, but at a luxury hotel, the same one he'd taken Jenna to a few months prior. I booked that exact room, but I wasn't alone. I had Ethan waiting inside along with a folder of documents, powerful enough to unseat any CEO in a heartbeat. As for me, I sat at the bar, martini in hand, waiting for the 2 main characters to walk into their final act. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to cry. All I needed was to let them see with their own eyes just how much I knew, and they would finally understand. The woman they tried to cast aside wasn't just a wife. She was the one who rewrote the rules, and now it was time to read the final verdict out loud. Issue Chapter 5. My birthday and a wish. No one would ever forget it was my birthday. Last year, Derek said he forgot to buy a cake because he was stuck in meetings. This year, he didn't even bother pretending he sent me a single text, "I'll be home late." Go ahead and sleep. And I did sleep, just not at home. I lay on the chaise lounge inside the suite at the Metropole Hotel, the same place he once brought Jenna. The room still carried the scent of oakwood and orange essential oil. The thick, luxurious curtains, the warm golden light. Everything was perfectly set for a romantic evening, if this were about love. But tonight wasn't about love. It was about truth and an uninvited party. I wore a simple black dress, my hair loose, no heavy makeup. Ethan sat at the desk flipping through pages of documents with a calm that felt almost surreal, as if he were reading the morning paper, not holding evidence capable of toppling a CEO. I had left the door slightly ajar, and at exactly 8:35 p.m. Derek and Jenna walked in hand, laughing like the world belonged to them. They stepped inside and froze. Ethan looked up. I stood and poured myself a glass of wine. "Good evening, Derek. Jenna. Welcome to my birthday party. Although, I know neither of you intended to come." No one said a word. Jenna took a half step back. Derek scanned the room like there might be hidden cameras. I set the wine glass down, then slid a dark blue folder across the table toward them. Inside, you'll find every invoice transaction and email. Also the market expansion contract you both signed with that so-called satellite startup. And this, I held up a final sheet of paper, is the company charter you re-signed last month. Section 9, Clause 2. Any confirmed act of financial fraud results in the immediate suspension of the CEO's executive authority. Derek began to sweat. Jenna pressed her lips tightly. Neither could utter a word. I pulled a small birthday candle from my purse and placed it in the center of the table. Lit it with the lighter Ethan handed me. "Make a wish," I said with a soft smile. "You're the one who's always been good at blowing out candles." Remember, Derek stood frozen like stone. I glanced at my watch. "Tomorrow at 9 a.m. there will be an emergency board meeting. I suggest you prepare a proper farewell speech. Oh, and don't forget your laptop. We'll need to reset all system access privileges." I turned and walked toward the door. Paused for just a moment, then looked Derek square in the eye. "Happy birthday to me." And I walked out of that room. Behind me, no one followed. No screaming, no explanations. Only the soft click of a door closing, quiet yet absolute. Like the final punctuation mark to an era I had once let others write for me. Chapter 6. I didn't have to push anyone off the edge. They jumped on their own. The next morning I arrived at the boardroom 15 minutes early. The room was just as I remembered, glass walls, a long wooden table, those familiar leather chairs where I once sat as Clare the co-founder. But today I took a different seat facing Derek. He arrived 5 minutes late. He looked tired, slightly hunched. Jenna wasn't with him. Maybe she had finally realized this was no longer a game of romance, it was a power play. And she didn't have the credentials to sit at the table. I placed my laptop on the table, opened the presentation. Nothing flashy. Just one line, emergency report, executive level financial violations. Ethan sat beside me. No introductions, no small talk. None were needed. Once the board members had taken their seats, I began the presentation, clear, concise, emotionless. Suspicious expenditures over the past 8 months. The satellite company led by Jenna with no real operations. Internal emails proving Derek knew and deliberately aided the scheme. The amended charter already signed. Any CEO found guilty of misconduct would be immediately suspended. I finished in under 12 minutes. No one interrupted. As I paused, Ethan took over to read the official statement from the legal office. The language was surgical abuse of authority, violation of financial protocols, and damage to shareholder interests. Derek sat in silence. Sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. He forced a smile. "This is all a misunderstanding. I think Clare is letting emotions get in the way I cut in." "No, Derek, you're wrong. If I had let emotions take over, I would have blown up the day I saw that photo of you kissing Jenna in the hotel." The room fell silent, frozen, but I didn't. I stayed quiet. I waited. I collected. I revised the charter. I built a plan. I turned my laptop screen around, showing them photos, files, signatures, scanned contracts, detailed bank statements. I'm not here to reclaim a title. I'm here to reclaim the truth. Because the title, co-founder, isn't a favor you granted me, Derek. It's something I created every line of code, every first pitch meeting, every sleepless night. One board member leaned toward Ethan and whispered something. Ethan nodded. The member looked up and said, "We'll conduct a vote now." 5 minutes later, the results appeared on screen. Motion to suspend current CEO, 6 in favor, 0 against. I looked at Derek. He had no words left. He lowered his head and stood no longer a CEO, no longer the powerful husband. He was just a man who had lost everything, not because someone struck back, but because he believed for too long that no one would ever speak up. As he walked out of the room, I stayed seated. No celebration, no gloating. Just a quiet exhale, as if finally I had finished cleaning up the ashes someone else left behind. on my name. Chapter 7. I didn't seek revenge. I just refused to fade away. After Derek left the company, didn't collapse like he had once warned it would. On the contrary, there was a collective sigh of relief. Perhaps everyone had already sensed the instability, the needless tension in meetings, the rash decisions no one dared to challenge. But when a man occupies the highest seat who has the courage to speak, I didn't return as CEO. I didn't need a title to prove my worth. Instead, I took the role of head of product and rebuilt the core team, the people Derek once dismissed, the ones Jenna had quietly pushed out. I worked hard, but not to shine. I worked to restore the soul of the company, the soul that had once been lit on that very first night between me and Derek, back when things were still real. I never mentioned him to anyone. No bad-mouthing, no retelling, no dragging his name through the dirt. I let the facts speak for themselves. 3 months later, Derek appeared in the office lobby. I wasn't surprised. He looked thinner, eyes dark with fatigue, shirt wrinkled. In his hand was a folder. "Claire, can we speak in private?" I nodded. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. There was no reason left to be. We sat in a small meeting room, the same one that used to be our brainstorming space when the company was still young. He started with a sentence I didn't expect I was wrong. I said nothing. I lost the company. I lost you. And I lost myself. I thought I could do it all without you, but I was wrong. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to start over, even under your leadership. I looked him in the eye, not to insult, but to end it. Derek, I don't hate you anymore. I don't even wish you pain. But I can't hire someone who once tried to erase me from the company I built. This is where I learned how to exist again, not where I recycle the past. He nodded, but in his eyes I saw shame, a kind of quiet resignation, not because I was cruel, but because I had stepped so far beyond his reach. He stood, walked out, never looked back. And in that moment, I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumphant. I simply told myself, sometimes forgiveness isn't saying, I forgive you. It's being strong enough to say, I no longer need to keep you in the story of my life. Chapter 8. It's time I tell my own story. A year after Derek left, I stood on stage at an international tech conference as the co-founder and head of product of the company. The entire room applauded as I shared the journey of rebuilding not just a company, but myself. Someone asked me if I ever regretted staying silent during the time I was pushed aside. I said no. Because silence doesn't mean weakness. Silence is choosing when to speak, and when you finally do, no one can ignore it. Derek now works for a small startup in another city. Jenna, I heard she was let go after misusing company funds at her new job. I didn't feel joy hearing that, but I didn't feel sorrow either. Because I no longer live in their world. I rebuilt the company with people who genuinely believe in shared values, not in power games. I taught myself how to trust again, but this time I started with trusting myself. Some nights, I still sit alone in the office, looking out over the glowing city. I don't carry resentment anymore. What I carry is a lesson. That women don't have to scream to be heard. Don't have to trample others to stand tall. Don't have to get revenge on anyone. Because when you truly walk away from what once held you back and build a new chapter on your own terms, that is the loudest answer of all. I was once seen as the woman behind her husband's success. Now I am a woman who doesn't need anyone standing in front of her to be called successful. This story doesn't end with Derek's downfall. It ends with my rise. And if you, the one listening to me right now, have ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or silently hurting, then let me say this to you. Don't rush to scream. Stand your ground. Prepare quietly. And one day you won't have to raise your voice because the world will have no choice but to listen. I once loved. I once trusted. I once sacrificed. And I was once betrayed, erased, dismissed. But today I am no longer the woman walking behind anyone. I am the woman walking alone, but on a path I chose, with the strength I rebuilt from my own ruins. If you're somewhere out there, lost in the confusion, hurting and feeling unheard. I want you to know this. You are not alone. And even if you're not ready to fight back yet, not ready to leave, not ready to speak up, please don't blame yourself. As long as you hold on to your clarity, there will come a day when you won't need to scream, but the world will have no choice but to listen, because the most powerful silence comes from the one who knows exactly who she is.